Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the audio companion to my book, The Imperfect and Unfinished Math Teacher. My name is Chase. I'm glad you're here with us. Just so you know, I'm making this recording from my father's farm in Independence, Oregon, so you will hear some birds and some other noises in the background, and frankly, I hope they add a nice little touch for episode 3 here. Now, the first 3 episodes of this series describe the building blocks, the tools that we will use on our journey to becoming more active partners in each other's growth. In episode 1, I offered us the 4 beacons, and they are the guiding principles that will help us reclaim control over our professional growth and guide us moving forward. In episode 2, I invited us to make a shift in our professional identity, to see ourselves as caretakers of the math stories our students are authoring in math class. This shift helps us get out of our grade-level content silos and see that we all have the same professional purpose to keep the math stories of our students healthy and unfinished. And in episode 3, we're going to talk about the final building block, something called deliberate practice. We're going to talk about what deliberate practice is and how it can help us expand our potential for something I call professional flourishment. Flourishment is a mashup of nourishment and flourishing. It's an essential word for us to know because it is what we are seeking on this journey, more professional flourishment. It's the feeling of enthusiasm we get when we grow, when we're able to accomplish something we hadn't been able to do before. And it's something that everybody feels when they're thriving at what they love to do, but for us as teachers, flourishment is essential because this job is too damn hard not to be in love with it. So that's what this episode is about, understanding what deliberate practice is and how it can help us expand our capacity for flourishment. Along the way, I'm going to tie in what we talked about in episodes 1 and 2. And to start us off, I want to share a story about a guy named Timur Gareev. He's a really, really good chess player. Just how good is Timur? Well, get a load of this. On December 3rd and 4th, in 2016, at the age of 29, Timur played 48 games of chess against 48 different players, and out of those 48 games, he won 35, had 7 draws, and he lost 6. There's something else you should know. Timur played all of these games simultaneously, taking on each opponent at once. All 48 games started at the same time, and the longest one lasted about 19 hours. That's pretty good, right? Well, get a load of this. He played all 48 of these games blindfolded. Yeah, let that sink in for just a moment. Timur never saw a chessboard, never touched a chess piece for any of these games. A messenger relayed moves back and forth between Timur and his opponents. Opponents, remember, who were only playing a single game against Timur in front of a chessboard that they could see, but Timur had to hold in his memory along with 47 other chessboards. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculously good, right? A few more fun facts here. Timur rode the equivalent of 50 miles on a stationary bike while he played these games. It makes you wonder if we have something to learn from him about letting our students physically move so they can focus on learning mathematics. Second fun fact, this event happened in a casino in Vegas, and at some point the fire alarm went off, and everyone had to evacuate, and play wouldn't resume for 30 more minutes. 30 minutes! I mean, what is that dude doing during that time? Walking around the strip? I mean, how did he get that good? So, how did Timur accomplish this feat? Well, if you said practice, you're not wrong. Timur had to practice for tens of thousands of hours. But practice isn't just enough. It's how Timur practices that's important here. A type of practice called deliberate practice, which, as it turns out, is a specific type of practice, one that isn't about reaching our potential so much as it is about expanding our potential, expanding our capacity. The term deliberate practice comes from the work of Anders Ericsson and his research on the science of expertise. He spent his career examining the methods and habits of mind of expert performers, people who, like Timur, exhibit a high degree of craftsmanship at performing complex skills. And he published his results in his book called Peak: Secrets of the New Science of Expertise. Now, if you've heard of Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, or if you've heard of the phrase 10,000 hours, you're already familiar with Ericsson's work. And if you want a fuller taste of Ericsson's research, then I invite you to listen to episode 244 of Podcast Freakonomics. It's called How to Become Great at Just About Anything. And, well, it's pretty great. Check it out after this episode, of course. Now, what Ericsson found is that expert performers are always unfinished. They are never satisfied with their current level of performance and are always seeking ways not just to achieve their potential, but to expand their potential. And this makes sense. Once we've reached a satisfactory level of performance, improvement stops. The same is true if we believe we've hit our ceiling. If we believe we've achieved our potential and can't do any better, we're finished. And for Timur to become Timur, he had to continually believe that his potential was expandable, that his performance as a chess player could improve beyond his current abilities. And this means he had to be inherently motivated, right? To fuel his fire, to keep pushing himself, challenging himself, spending tens of thousands of hours playing, thinking, and breathing chess. He had to really, really love it, right? Chess had to give him flourishment. And the same is true for us as teachers. Teaching must give us flourishment. Flourishment is the purpose of our journey. It's the reward we feel for continually growing and remaining unfinished. And the best way to elevate and expand our capacity for flourishment is to engage in what I call the 3 core elements of deliberate practice. And they are simply focus, vantage, and relationships. If this language sounds familiar to you, it is. Flourishment, focus, vantage, and relationships are embedded in the beacons from episode 1, and they are an integral part of the shift I invite us to make in episode 2, the shift to becoming a story-focused teacher. And while these first 3 episodes explain the building blocks for us on our journey, I want you to know that all of these building blocks are coherently related to each other. They all represent the same thing, the foundation to our new cultural professionalism, where we can help each other thrive. Let's start with focus. In order to stay unfinished, Timur had to constantly focus on what he valued. Data that nourished him, that allowed him to measure his progress so he could experience the joy of progressing, right? Because after all, the journey itself must be rewarding. And that meant focusing on data that helped Timur feel validated for all his hard work. And this is important. He needed to feel validated in ways that mattered to him. And it also meant he had to have a focused goal. He had to know what getting better looked like so that he could seek out the data that showed him how he could get better. Data that didn't just nourish him, but also activated his sense of agency and pointed to a pathway forward. And while the same is very much true for us, we must find data that nourishes us, that validates us, and also seek out data that can point us to a pathway forward. I want to point out that Timur has a tremendous advantage here that we do not as teachers. We don't have access to the type of data that he does. After his matches, Timur can immediately examine computer-generated data that helps him see where he made mistakes and can show him the best possible move he should have made. We don't have that luxury as teachers, do we? We never get to look at that type of data when it comes to the outcomes of our craftsmanship. At the end of our lessons, we're scrambling to collect exit tickets students didn't have enough time to complete, reset our classroom spaces, and left wondering if we have time to use the bathroom before next period. Furthermore, chess is a closed system. There's always a best move, and oftentimes many good ones. But teaching isn't always like this, right? Our days are riddled with dilemmas, moments where there are no best moves, situations where we know that no matter what we do, we're not going to meet the needs of some of our students. And lastly, and most importantly, Timur doesn't need to build rapport and a culture of belonging with his chess pieces. His chess pieces don't have good days and bad days. They aren't absent. They don't have emotions. Obviously, our students do. They aren't pawns. They are human beings with their own math story. They have identity and agency, and their behavior varies from day to day, moment to moment. Now, despite the innate differences between our professional landscapes, the truth still holds for us as teachers. In order to find the flourishment we crave, we must focus on data that nourishes us and can tell us how to grow. And that's not test scores or other traditional forms of assessment data. It's the human data. This was the point of the shift I invite us to make, from being content-focused to being more story-focused. It encourages us to embody the second beacon, which tells us to focus on measuring what we value, the human data that is in the classroom, data that reveals to us their experience, their mindset, their identity and agency, and the math story they're telling themselves. For Timur to become Timur, he had to constantly shift his vantage on his own thinking. He had to position himself in ways that helped him stay unstuck, so that he could keep moving forward in his practice, and to position himself to shake things up from time to time so he could see what he needed to see to change his own mind about his practice. And many times during his journey, he had to admit that he was wrong and to let go of what wasn't working so that he could focus on new, more effective approaches. And sometimes this meant exercising the patience and courage to take steps backwards in the short term so that he could further his craft in the long run. Another one of the other key takeaways from Erickson's research is that expert performers stay unstuck because they're constantly willing to upset their own internal homeostasis. That is, they're willing to disrupt their own thinking about themselves, their craft, and how they are practicing. They actually seek out and identify actively the unproductive beliefs and actions that aren't working for them, but are still sort of tacit to them, existing below the level of awareness. In other words, they seek vantage on their thinking so that they don't let their thinking get in their own way. And one of the best ways we can do that is by watching each other perform their craft. Timur had the luxury of watching his colleagues play, and free from the cognitive demands of having to make decisions, he can see the game from a different perspective, a different vantage. Detached from any desired outcome, he can watch the impact of the decisions being made, and he can begin to bring to the surface some assumptions that he's making that are still holding him back. This is why we must be in each other's math classrooms, so that we can embody the third beacon, to seek vantage from the student perspective. When we watch math class from the student perspective, we position ourselves to see our own thinking and bring to the surface the assumptions and habits that are still tacit to us, because sometimes it's actually our own thinking that is causing us to get stuck. Of all the wisdom I have to offer you, spend time in a colleague's math classroom. You will see what you need to see to keep yourself unstuck. And I know that we work in a system of silos that discourages collaboration, and it normalizes the act of teaching as something done alone behind closed classroom doors. It's perhaps one of the greatest ironies of our job. For work that is so human, so cultural, so communal, it is also a very lonely profession. And I know that being in each other's classrooms can seem scary at first. It's not a natural part of our cultural professionalism. But if you're feeling insecure, I assure you, we are all imperfect. And we are all capable of giving each other the grace we need to be okay with that reality. And here we get to relationships, the final element of deliberate practice and the fourth beacon. Timur's accomplishment didn't happen alone. He needed to build trustworthy relationships with colleagues who could help him see what he couldn't see for himself. These relationships help him sustain his passion when he could not go it alone, and to help him get unstuck when he could not do it for himself. Together, they develop a rich and robust sense of appreciation for each other's ability and their style. They help further each other's craft, challenging and pushing each other because they know that their individual ability is dependent on their collective ability. If one of them improves, they all improve. And the same is true for us. Teaching is a craft that we can learn best through each other, and we're going to need each other to help us see what we cannot see for ourselves. We're going to need each other to offer encouragement and support when we can't go it alone. And it's time we start building a culture of professionalism where we have the trustworthy relationships we need to be active partners in each other's professional growth. Before we get to the closing segment, I want to share with you a passage from one of my favorite authors, Parker Palmer. We cannot embrace this challenge all alone, at least not for long. We need trustworthy relationships, tenacious communities of support, if we are to sustain the journey toward an undivided life. That journey has solitary passages, to be sure, and yet it is simply too arduous to take without the assistance of others. And because we have such a vast capacity for self-delusion, we will inevitably get lost en route without correctives from outside of ourselves. So how do we become expert, thriving math teachers? Well, it starts with believing that our potential is always expandable and that we're capable of doing things that we can't currently do. And the pain of growth must be worth it. The journey itself needs to give us flourishment. And to stay motivated, we need to focus on data that nourishes us and can help us grow. And to help us stay unstuck and to avoid plateaus, we need to seek vantage on our own beliefs and actions, on our own identity and agency, and learn to see our own thinking. And finally, we need to build trustworthy relationships, a tenacious community of support to help encourage each other and to help each other see what we cannot see for ourselves. Flourishment, focus, vantage, relationships. These are all woven into the beacons that will guide us on our journey to becoming not just the teachers we want to be, but the teachers we're meant to be. And between now and next time, let's grow our tenacious community of support. Share this video with your colleagues, invite them to join us on this journey, and find ways to get in each other's classrooms. And remember to give each other the grace we all need, right? We are all imperfect math teachers. Let's help each other stay unfinished. Join us on our Facebook group, The Imperfect and Unfinished Math Teacher, and stay connected with me by signing up for my newsletter at chaseorton.com. I'll see you down the road.